Coming up on our newscast, President Park Geun-hye meets with her Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Bali and asked for help persuading Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear ambitions and focus more on its economy. President Xi, in response, takes his strongest stance yet against North Korea's nuclear program. Korea's Financial Supervisory Service, or the FSS, comes under fire for sitting idly by while tens of thousands of investors suffer losses at the hands of debt-ridden Tong Yang Group. One of the country's main consumer advocacy agencies has put the head of the financial watchdog on the hot seat. The Security Consultative Meeting between the U.S. and Korea ended last week, and the two allies had much on the table to discuss. We take an in-depth look at what Korea and the U.S. agreed on and at the differences that still remain. We have these stories and more, so stay with us.
It is 5 a.m. in Washington, 5 p.m. in Bali, and 6 on a Monday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us. We begin by returning our focus to the ongoing dispute within the National Assembly.
Right, Korea's ruling and opposition parties continue to lock horns over former President Roh Moo-hyun's remarks on an inter-Korean maritime border and the whereabouts of the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit transcript.
Meanwhile, the prosecution has begun summoning former officials from the Noh administration for questioning. Our Park Ji-won starts us off.
The ruling Saenuri Party says the National Intelligence Service needs to release its tape recording of the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit between then President Roh Moo-hyun and late North Korean leader Kim Jong-il to reveal the truth about the ongoing controversy surrounding the summit meeting and its missing transcript. Prosecutors investigating the whereabouts of the transcript announced last week that it was never been transferred to the National Archives as it should have been. Instead, prosecutors found two versions of the transcript in an electronic government document management system used by President Roh. One of the versions was retrieved by prosecutors among deleted files.
We need to know why the Noh administration discarded a historic transcript in an illegal manner, in violation of the nation's record management law that was made by the Noh administration itself.
The opposition Democratic Party, which is a liberal party that includes many of former President Roh's aides, is watching the situation closely but refraining from making too many comments on the matter. It says the controversy over the transcript is unrelated to the livelihoods of citizens. The DP says it wants to focus on other political issues, such as tax reforms or senior pensions.
With sincere preparations, the party will show the people what it is like to be true opposition lawmakers that fight at the National Assembly.
The controversy surrounding the summit began last October during a parliamentary inspection when the ruling Saenuri Party lawmakers said former President Roh made remarks about giving up the nation's de facto maritime border in the West Sea during the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit. The political turmoil had compounded ever since, as the transcript of the summit was nowhere to be found. Prosecutors plan to summon around 30 people of the former Noh administration for questioning and announce their official results by the end of the month. The results are expected to have big knockout effects on a by-election schedule at the end of the month. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And staying at the National Assembly on this Monday, the ruling Saenuri Party laid out its goals for the current session.
The party leader also urged Parliament to move forward with bills aimed at creating jobs and reviving the sluggish real estate market. Our Kim Hyun-ji has this story.
Saenuri Party leader Hwang Woo-yeol told lawmakers Monday that the government and the legislature should come together to raise the nation's per capita GDP to $30,000 US, saying that the nation needs a new paradigm for economic growth. Hwang stressed that President Park's vision for a creative economy based on an individual's creativity and the convergence of industry and culture is the answer. As such, he said the parliament should approve laws that support young people seeking to launch their own businesses.
The National Assembly must set up a legislative framework enabling Korea to enter the era of the $30,000 per capita GDP and become an advanced nation where people are happy.
The ruling party leader asked the minority parties not to abuse the National Assembly Advancement Law, which was designed to keep the majority party from ramming bills through the legislature without the participation of the minority.
We must vote on bills on schedule, as the people expect. If the majority party rams a bill through on its own or the minority party opposes a bill just for the sake of opposition, public opinion will turn sour and the people will be quick to judge in elections.
The ruling party leader also offered an apology for the government's scaled-down pension plan for senior citizens, seen as a retreat from one of the president's major campaign pledges. The minority parties, including the main opposition Democratic Party, criticized the ruling party leader's speech, saying that he glossed over important issues that have rattled the nation, including the spy agency's alleged meddling in last year's presidential election and questions about how the ruling party got its hands on a transcript of the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit before the December election. The Democratic Party will lay out its goals in a speech Tuesday. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
The ruling Security Party and the Labor Ministry agreed on this Monday to push for a revision bill that would limit the maximum number of work hours per week to 52. Now, if approved, the bill would require that employees clock in for no more than 40 hours per week, plus an additional 12 hours of overtime, which includes work done on weekends.
Employees can currently punch in for 12 hours of overtime work and another 16 hours for weekend labor, pushing the maximum number of work hours per week to 68. If the National Assembly greenlights the bill during this parliamentary session, firms with at least 1,000 full-time employees will be required to adopt the new work-hour limit in 2016 and smaller firms at a later date.
Well, last week was a busy one for the nation's defense ministry, with top military officials from the United States, which is Korea's biggest ally, visiting Seoul for a series of significant defense talks. Now, while some tangible outcomes have emerged that are expected to further boost the nation's defense capabilities, some outstanding issues do remain.
That's right. To walk us through the current military issues facing Seoul and Washington and to provide perspective on the differences that still divide the two longtime allies, our Defense Ministry correspondent Han Daeun joins us live from the Arirang News Center. Hello, Daeun.
Good evening, Daniel. Kanyang. The annual Korea-U.S. Defense Dialogue ended last week, but major military issues are still the talk of the town here in Korea. The biggest outcome of the Security Consultative Meeting, or SCM talks, was, of course, the official endorsement of a tailored deterrent strategy against North Korean nuclear and missile threats. Since the strategy contains confidential military information, we're not privy to every single detail of the agreement, but I'll break it down for you as clearly as possible. The plan, the tailored deterrent strategy, is a specified tool that counters North Korea's asymmetric nuclear threat, and it's different from the previous abstract umbrella strategy provided by the U.S. Let's bring in a chart. The plan calls for military action based on 3 levels. The first is the level of a general threat. Since an actual threat has not been detected in this scenario, political and diplomatic efforts are primarily made to resolve Pyongyang's nuclear issue. Most of the time, the Korean military would operate within this level. The second is the level of imminent threat. At this stage, the military has detected imminent missile or nuclear activities from the north and deploys the nation's kill chain system to get rid of the threats. Most conventional weapons, including stealth fighter jets, stealth bombers, and aircraft carriers, will also be involved at this stage to support the kill chain system. The third is the level of an actual threat. At this stage, the Korea Air and Missile Defense, or KAMD system, will be activated to destroy missiles or nuclear weapons that may be in the air. And nuclear weapons provided by the U.S. will be used at this final stage. Now, I'm sure many of you are wondering what a kill chain or KAMD system is, so I talked to a weapons expert for further explanation.
A kill chain system is an aggressive defense system that deters the enemy's potential threats in advance. It's a quick chain of military action from threat assessment, conducted by all possible information collecting, to actual strike against missiles, all done in just 30 minutes' time. The KAMD system is activated when the kill chain fails to destroy missiles. It was built exclusively to intercept and destroy short-range but fast-speed missiles in the lower level of the air so it won't fall on the South Korean soil.
Weapons experts say the kill chain and the KAMD system are basically the best South Korea can do, given the fact that we're not in a position to possess a nuclear weapon. Kang-young?
Well, Tan, I think I now have a clearer grasp of what the tailored deterrence strategy is, and I'm sure our viewers have found that helpful as well. Now, let's move on to other pending issues, Tan. How are experts reacting to how the talks were left regarding the transition of wartime operational control, which is currently set for December of 2015?
Well, as you know, there wasn't a clear conclusion as to when the OPCON would be transferred, but government officials and experts say Seoul and Washington have somewhat agreed on the need to further delay the timeline amid ever more increasing North Korean nuclear threats. What was stressed all throughout the security talks was that the transition would be conditions-based. Let's listen in to a defense expert on what this means.
The first condition would be evaluation of the current security situation, including assessment of North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. The second would be certifying the countering capabilities of the South Korean military. The certifying process would include assessing how well prepared the military is to command the wartime operational control.
Okay, now let's move on to a different topic. It's not everything, but it affects almost everything. What about the money, the ongoing military cost-sharing talks? I believe not much progress on that issue has been made.
That's right, Daniel. Seoul and Washington continued their tug of war on how much each should contribute in keeping the U.S. troops in Korea. The Korean government has put aside roughly $740 million for its share of the burden for next year, while the U.S. is requesting at least $930 million. Situations aren't getting better amid Washington's tight budget cuts, but some experts remain optimistic.
Such differences have existed in the past. It's not the first time. I think the two sides will be able to work it out as long as they find ways to better systemize the cost division and monitor each spending. Also, there are a great amount of accumulated money that have not yet been spent.
And before I go, just as a reminder, a Korea-U.S.-Japan joint naval exercise will begin tomorrow, Tuesday. During the three-day drill, U.S. aircraft carrier George Washington will be participating. Since the drill comes right after the Seoul-Washington defense talks and after a North Korea deterrence strategy was completed, it's expected to stoke already annoyed nerves of Pyongyang. We're hearing strong criticisms from the North, but it looks like we'll hear a lot more this week.
And we will keep a close eye on how the situation develops for the remainder of the week. Thank you, Dan, for the comprehensive analysis.
That was our Defense Ministry correspondent Han Dang with a wrap-up on current military issues between Korea and the U.S.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now shifting gears to the economy, Korean import prices rose. Now, President Park Geun-hye is currently in Bali, Indonesia, to take part in this year's APEC summit, but the Korean leader had other engagement to attend to on the sidelines of the annual summit. In her bilateral summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, the two leaders once again made it clear that they stand together in opposition to North Korea's nuclear program. Arirang News presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju is traveling with the president, and she follows us this report from the tropical Indonesian island.
President Park has asked China to persuade North Korea to make the right decision and give up its nuclear ambitions. During a bilateral summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping ahead of the official opening of the APEC summit on Monday, President Park stressed that Pyongyang should not put everything it has into nuclear development when so many North Koreans are suffering from chronic malnutrition. She also expressed regret over North Korea's sudden postponement of a plan to reunite families separated by the Korean War and emphasized the importance of close cooperation between Seoul and Beijing. In the third bilateral summit between Presidents Park and Xi, the Chinese leader took a stronger stance on the North Korean nuclear issue. President Xi reportedly said that China opposes North Korea's possession of nuclear weapons outright and will take a firm stand against future nuclear tests. A high-ranking Korean government official told reporters that the Chinese president also pledged to abide by UN Security Council resolutions against Pyongyang. President Park had earlier expressed appreciation to Beijing for announcing last month that it was banning a long list of equipment and chemical substances from export to North Korea. President Park also held a bilateral summit with Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, where the two sides agreed to work towards signing a Korea-Canada free trade agreement by the end of this year. Later in the day, in her keynote speech at the first session of the APEC summit, President Park put an emphasis on the need to push ahead with trade liberalization within the Asia-Pacific region while staying away from trade protectionism, even during hard times, to revitalize the world economy. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News, Bali.
A document proving Japan had forcefully brought women into wartime sexual slavery has been made public. Japan's Kyodo News says this old court document shows the Japanese military during World War II coerced 35 Dutch women into sexual slavery in Indonesia. Well, the more than 500-page document was made available from last month to this past Sunday by the National Archives of Japan upon a request by a Japanese civic organization. Now, what the document contains goes against the current Shinzo Abe's administration's stance on the sex slave issue. The Abe cabinet insists there is no official evidence to prove that the victims were forced to provide sexual services. Now, back here in this country, one of the country's main consumer advocacy agencies is planning to launch a campaign calling on the head of the country's financial watchdog to step down. The move comes amid mounting criticism of the Financial Supervisory Service for failing to respond to investors that have suffered losses from the debt-ridden Tong Yang Group. Our UDN reports.
The Financial Consumer Agency has been growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of action from the country's financial watchdog in dealing with the massive losses incurred by the tens of thousands of people who invested in the cash-strapped Tong Yang Group. The Financial Supervisory Service has already been under fire for failing to properly monitor the debt-ridden Tong Yang Group. The country's 30th largest conglomerate had sold a massive amount of high-risk corporate bills and bonds, mostly to individual investors, to repay its debt. The Financial Consumer Agency, or FCA, says it has repeatedly asked to meet with the head of the FSS to create a relief plan for the nearly 20,000 investors who have filed for losses with the FCA. After failing to get any response, the consumer agency vowed on Monday to launch a campaign calling on the head of the financial watchdog, Choi Soo-hyun, to step down. The Financial Supervisory Service maintains that it is doing all it can to deal with the Tong Yang crisis. Since last Friday, the watchdog has been analyzing more than 8,000 complaints filed by investors holding Tong Yang debt. Around 40,000 investors have fallen victim to the Tong Yang crisis, and with no relief plan announced, their concerns are growing.
Most of these people have invested their marriage funds, retirement savings, and severance pay. It's hard to even imagine the pain that these people are going through. One widowed investor has even lost all of her former husband's insurance money.
Tong Yang Group owes retail investors 2 trillion won, or roughly $1.8 billion, and about $840,000 to financial firms as of the end of last month. Yurian, Arirang News.
Debt, and more stories related with debt. More than 100 small and mid-sized firms in Korea could face debt restructuring this year following consecutive defaults by larger firms that could have also affect them. The Financial Supervisory Service and creditor banks are reportedly drawing up a list of corporate debtors from more than 1,000 small and mid-sized enterprises that owe banks roughly 50 billion won, or $46.7 million. The corporations will either be subject to a creditor-led debt workout program or court receivership based on their degree of credit risk. The list will be announced next month. The highest tally was in 2010 when 121 SMEs were placed under debt restructuring programs. The World Bank lowered its growth forecast for East Asian economies for 2013 and 2014, citing slower growth in China and other countries in the region. The Washington-based development bank in a report Monday said it expects East Asia to expand by 7.1% this year, which is down 0.7 percentage points from an earlier forecast. It also cut next year's expected growth to 7.2%. The World Bank says the slowing growth in the region is the result of China shifting from an export-oriented economy to a more domestically focused one. It also added that growth in larger middle-income countries like Indonesia and Thailand has slowed due to lower investment and lower-than-expected commodity prices. And the rapid rise in Korea's national debt is increasingly pressuring the government to either increase taxes or make serious spending cuts. The finance ministry says the government's debt is projected to grow to $480 billion next year from $413 billion last year. The projected 2014 debt represents an 8.5-fold increase from $55 billion tallied in 1997. Given President Park Geun-hye's policy to expand welfare spending, fiscal experts say the government will probably have to hike taxes in the near future. Time for weather. That means we turn to our Kim Bo-kyung standing by at the Weather Center. Hello, Bo-kyung. Now we hear that the 24th tropical storm of the season, Tanas, is on its way.
Yes, Daniel. The tropical storm Tanas is shaping up to be a severe one with strong winds blowing at a rate of 48 meters per second.
Right, and this would make it the first typhoon or tropical storm in October in 15 years here in Korea. So, Bo-kyung, when are we expecting Tanas to affect us here on the peninsula?
Well, Pyongyang, sea south of Jeju Island is already under a typhoon watch. Let's take a look at our satellite map for the details. At 3 p.m. today, Tanas passed out into the sea off Okinawa, Japan, and it looks like the storm will pass about 150 kilometers south of Jeju Island by 3 p.m. tomorrow before moving past Tokdo and towards Sapporo, Japan. Now, tomorrow, Korea's east coast and southern regions, including Jeju Island, will be directly influenced by Tanas, with heavy rain pouring down at 30 millimeters per hour. So please gear up for floods and landslides. Other than that, the rest of the nation will be indirectly influenced by Tanas with rain in forecast all day. Now, taking a closer look at tomorrow's forecast, Seoul and Daegu should make it to 21 and 22 degrees respectively. Meanwhile, Gwangju and Busan should both hit 24. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Dokdo should make it to the low 20s and Mount Kumgang peaks at 11. Well, that's all I have for you this hour. Have a wonderful evening and join me for another update after 8.
Thank you for that, Bo-kyung. Well, that's all from us for this hour. Hope you're able to shake off that Monday blues and kickstart this Tuesday with a bang. This has been Daniel Che. Thank you for watching.
And I'm Moon Geon-young. Thank you, as always, for being here with us. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and remember to take an umbrella with you tomorrow morning, and have a great night.